Yo guys, it's me Josh and welcome to Let's Talk About, the series in which I talk about the things that are flowing through my head. So today I'm going to be talking about housing developments, or as I like to call them, eBay estates. So in case you haven't seen one of these before, they're basically where a company, like a developer, like Molten Green or something, they have like names like that, very sort of legal firm sounding names, will build a load of houses at once, and they're all sort of like their own like community, if you like. It's all sort of interconnected, and it's got like one entrance to all of them. And in theory, this sounds, not the worst idea. Pretty decent idea, but the trouble is, for some reason, they always build them on grassland. So where you'd normally, have just natural grassland, just in a nice bit of greenery, that is then replaced with a housing development. And let's face it, a nice bit of greenery is a lot nicer to sort of have than a housing development, because you've just got a bunch of houses now. It doesn't really look as nice, does it? And so the actual idea of a housing development isn't bad, but they should just put them on a brownfield site. If you don't know what a brownfield site is, it's basically where a building like a brewery or something has been abandoned, and then you tear it down and build something in its space. So a space that was already being used for another purpose. It's not like you're not losing any greenery. You're adding rather than taking away and adding. Whereas with a greenfield site, which is basically any grass space, places like that, or forests and stuff, you're taking away greenery and you're replacing it with something industrialized. And I firmly believe that brownfield sites are much better for the environment, look much nicer, and they're simply better overall. So if they built them on brownfield sites, I would not have much of an issue with them. But the fact that they are always built on green space really, really irks me, because I just find it's such a shame just to lose green space when you don't have to. So basically, my camera ran out of storage there. I need to get in the practice of clearing it off before starting these, because this is getting a bit annoying. This happened last week, I think. So, yeah. But what I was saying is, what irks me is when they build them on greenfield sites when they don't have to. When they can build them on brownfield sites and not take away the greenery. That really irks me, because it's like you're losing something, and you are gaining something, yes, but you don't have to lose that thing. Yes, it is more complicated to do so, but surely it is worth it if you are then just gaining rather than losing, because that site wouldn't have been used anyway. So you may as well use it for a housing development rather than just leave it abandoned. Yeah, you may as well use it for a housing development rather than just leave it abandoned. And the second thing, and this is more the experience of the people who buy them and more me getting irked that they're basically getting ripped off, but the fact that they are pretty much always poorly built. They're built en masse, and the building standards seem to always slip a bit in these housing developments. And I'm pretty sure one of my dad's friends actually bought a house on one of these housing developments, and he had a few teething problems with it because it had an air source heat pump. And apparently these are a bit temperamental with working. And of course, in these housing developments, because it's cheaper, they fit these air source heat pumps. And so he's not been able to have the heating properly working for a bit. Part of it is that it's just newly built anyway. But the fact that it's on a housing development, I do reckon it's because of the standards slipping a bit that he's got most of the problems that he's got. But yeah, it's like they're building them en masse, allowing the quality to slip down. If instead of having about 15 or 20 houses in these developments, they did about 5 or 6, then I'm sure they'd be good quality and you'd still have more houses. But it takes it all down to this other thing, and this is on to my next point, that they overpopulate the area. If with these housing developments, you wouldn't need them actually, if immigration was controlled. It's like, because of all this mass immigration from us being in the EU, and now the Home Secretary and the government not really having much of a control and grip over the immigration into this country. Because of that, these housing developments are being built largely to house people who've come in from abroad because they need to live somewhere, understandably. So if you didn't have so many people coming in, you wouldn't need as many houses. You wouldn't need as many ugly housing developments, which just are a bit annoying. And yeah, so a big problem with this that's causing this is immigration, but it's also maybe greed from the property developers wanting to build more and more houses to sell them for more and more money. Because you've got to think, they buy the land, especially with the greenfield sites, this is more the case, they buy the land, try and get it on the cheap, and then they'll make a few million profit selling the houses, because they'll spend, they'll spend a fair bit on the houses, but they'll spend probably like, I don't know, maybe 500,000 making, I'm not quite sure, but they spend maybe $1 million on doing up the houses and building them. But then what will also happen is they'll make about 3 or 4 million profit. So the profit margin is pretty decent for them. And so they want to try and cut as many corners as they legally can to increase their profit margin, which allows these standards to slip. So if they weren't so greedy for more money, then the standards most likely wouldn't slip. You wouldn't have these problems with these air source heat pumps being fitted because they'd fit ground source heat ones or boilers. I mean, that is the thing. I don't get this fad with air source heat pumps and all this, when you can just fit a bog standard boiler, which, what's wrong with a boiler? They hardly ever go wrong. Like, yeah, you have things like carbon monoxide, but that's rare, isn't it? As long as you properly keep it serviced, you don't really ever have problems with a boiler. I mean, I've got a boiler. Never really had an issue with it. It works fine. I don't see the issue with having boilers. I think that they're fine. And they're probably just as good technology. They're probably a better technology than these air source heat pumps. And the problem is with them is they were released too early and en masse. And it's actually a technology that has not been developed properly yet. So now you get all these houses with air source heat pumps that can't heat the house properly because it's not man enough for the job, because it's not been developed enough. Because it's almost like a prototype that's work in progress that has just been spawned onto all these housing developments. And I think that is a bit of a silly thing for these people to do, and it's a silly thing for them to fit into these houses. But just generally thinking, I'm not a fan of housing developments. I'd rather a few houses built in, sort of maybe next to each other, but nice green space between them, done in an aesthetic way, not sort of like just house. And I just don't like the way they're spawned en masse. I think it destroys the green space, and this country is overpopulated enough. I think allowing more immigrants in is just going to be a recipe for disaster. And they're trying to do it out of compassion. This is what I don't get. They're trying to do it out of compassion, but they're forgetting the whole concept of tough love. Because if they don't allow them in, they keep the living conditions of this country good. If you want to keep allowing more and more and more people in, slowly we'll retreat back to the living conditions of like the Victorian times, because we'll be so packed in together. That's part of the reason why the living conditions were so bad, is because people were packed in together. Like, it wouldn't be quite so bad because technology has moved on, but packing people in together never ends well. I mean, you just think of the Hillsborough disaster, people packed in together. You just think of the plague. That spread quickly because people were packed in together. There was cramped streets. Things like that. People need their own space. So allowing more and more immigrants into a country to the point where people don't have enough space is a silly and disastrous plan and idea, in my opinion. And I know a fair few people who agree with me on that, because I've discussed that with my friends and stuff. And it's just a recipe for disaster. And then these immigrants will end up going to a country with bad living conditions, and they'll be thinking to themselves, may as well stay where I am if I can't, have a nice life here, because it's so cramped, because there's so many people here. And it's like, you're getting queues for everything now, and it's like, when I go cycling, I'm going to have to dodge like 10 people because there's so many people there. It gets a bit ridiculous. So they need to cut down the immigration. I'm not saying deport people, but cut down the immigration, at least not allow a huge amount more in. And any immigrants they do allow in need to be adding value. Like these Hong Kong citizens, I think that's right sort of immigrants you want. Intelligent people who are ready to accept British values and have proven that in their way of life and the way they have conducted themselves in their previous country. Whereas, a lot of people say they're ready to live by British values, but they have shown that in practice, so they are the right type of immigrant to have. So you want to cut them down and you want to have the right type of ones. But yeah, on housing developments, my take on it, not a good thing. I think they should be cut back on. I think there should be less of them. And I think it should be something that I hope will fade into the future and won't be an issue, because I think they are another thing that's a recipe for disaster and just ruins the look and feel and whole living vibe, if you like, of towns and cities. But yeah, and even villages, they're building them. They built one in my village, and I think that's just so dumb. Well, not dumb, but it's just annoying. At least they did it in an aesthetic way, though, so it doesn't look too bad. But I think the less of these housing developments, the better, and they should be cut back on, and they shouldn't build too many more. So that's my take on that. Yeah, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. I'll be back with another video next week, which will be the 10th episode of this series. So I'll be doing sort of like one talking about the series and so far, and maybe my plans going forward with it. Yeah, hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next week. Peace. Actually, not next week. Well, next week on this channel, because on my main channel I've got a video going up. So I'll see you guys on Sunday. No, it's not Sunday, it's Saturday. So, peace.